So Brock Purdy has his new 49ers contract, but what about his offensive line? Now, before you yell at me, take a deep breath and look at the performance over the years. This is the pass protection for San Francisco's offensive line. There's a huge misconception about how exactly they performed in 2024. This was not the biggest problem on the team. But before you guys all go berserk, because I know you will when you see that 49ers were actually above average in pass protection last year, realize that the point of this discussion is to talk about the future dangers that the 49ers are facing up front. Even if they might have cumulatively improved in pass protection in 2024 over the record-breaking offensive season in 2023, I think that the 49ers face some major potential hurdles moving forward. One of those might be the health of their star up front, Trent Williams, the guy who is pictured with Brock Purdy right here up on the San Francisco Standard. Trent has missed games in every single season that he's been with the 49ers. So they have to have tackle depth to make sure that Brock Purdy's offensive line stays in place. If you drop off at that swing tackle position, you're in big problem as you're in a big problem as the 49ers. And then you've also got to figure out the interior. They addressed it somewhat during the NFL draft. Connor Colby, the 7th round pick, I thought that he was better than a 7th round talent. He's a polished run blocker already. Maybe he starts at that left guard position. That's actually my bold prediction for this 2025 49ers season. But even if he does start at left guard, there are the questions between left guard and center where Jake Brendel, in my opinion, regressed last season. So we have to look at this all in the short term for 2025 and in the long term moving forward, because Brock Purdy is now under contract through the 2030 season. You've made your massive quarterback investment, and now you have to make sure that the protection in front of him is as good as possible. But it's always more complex than social media makes it out to be, especially in a league where D-line play is outpacing O-line play in general. That's just the truth around the entire league. I would say that 29 or 30 fan bases are upset with their offensive line right now. The 49ers fans are not alone in this regard. And I mean, I've talked about this over the years, and I think it's become especially pronounced as the youth football levels focused on producing the best possible defensive linemen by using the best talent. I mean, I still talk about my high school team back at Mount Whitney High School in Visalia, where we had a great receiver named Kyle Bell, and he moved, awesome athlete, and he moved to defensive line. This was back in 2005. This is good 20 years ago. Moved to that edge rusher position. Back when edge rusher, defensive end in the 80s and the 90s, it was a big, bulky position. But then the best athletes started to move to that exterior defensive line. And I think that you're seeing the culmination of that at the professional level now, 20 years down the road, with the best athletes on the defense outpacing the best athletes on the offensive front. So a lot of teams are struggling when it comes to pass protection, especially relative to how it used to be. And I think that teams are trying to find an antidote for that. The 49ers, the reason that they love to run the ball is because they can stay on schedule. They can ensure that defensive linemen are at least thinking about something else, so they don't just pin their ears back and exhibit their athletic advantages over their offensive tackles. And last year, the 49ers did not stay on schedule nearly enough. They finished number 20 in first down run efficiency. I think a lot of it was because Christian McCaffrey missed most of that season. They probably didn't get as good of run blocking as they did in 2023 as well. And I think the 2023 line, despite the fact that it struggled in pass protection, especially relative to what we saw in 2024. I think the 2023 line did find a way to block, and it's all a symbiotic thing too. I think that when Christian McCaffrey's in there, he's going to make the line look better run blocking, and it's a mutual thing. There's benefits that come from both sides. Once you start missing pieces like the 49ers did last year, they got behind schedule. First down run efficiency dipped from number 1 to number 20, and then that had trickle-down effects to the pass game. But here's one of the big overarching 49ers team construction truths. And this one was shocking to me. Mike dug this up the other day. I had just never considered this from the overhead view until Mike mentioned it. He said, you know what? I think only one time the 49ers have extended an offensive lineman that they've drafted under Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. It's only happened once. That's what Mike said. And I go back and I made the list. These are the linemen the 49ers have drafted since Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch took over in 2017. Mike McGlinchey, he was a first-round pick out of Notre Dame. Justin School, sixth-round pick out of Vanderbilt in 2019. Colton McKivitz, West Virginia, fifth-rounder in 2020. Jalen Moore, 2021. Aaron Banks, 2021. Moore out of Western Michigan. Banks out of Notre Dame, like McGlinchey. Moore was a fifth-rounder. Banks was a second-rounder. Spencer Burford, fourth-round pick out of San Antonio in 2022. Nick Zakel out of Fordham. That was 2022 as well. That was the sixth round. Later became Brock Purdy's roommate. Dominic Pooney was a third rounder out of Kansas in 2024. Jarrett Kingston out of USC in 2024, a sixth rounder. And Connor Colby in 2025, the latest pick out of Iowa. So this is stunning. Out of the 10 offensive linemen the 49ers have drafted since Lynch and Shanahan took over in 2017, only one of them has received a contract extension with the team, and that is Colton McKivitz. And even that has not been a massive, lucrative contract extension. He's currently playing at $5.8 million per year. And this is in a world where Jalen Moore left the Kansas City Chiefs at $15 million per year. That was another 49ers tackle. Jalen Moore started a few games, never became a full-time starter like Colton McKivitz. So again, out of all the players the 49ers have drafted to be offensive linemen, since Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch took over, they have not paid big bucks to anyone at the end of their rookie contract. And they've only extended one, and that was at a bargain deal for Colton McKivitz. And I don't think that Colton McKivitz would take a deal like that anymore because he's improved his play. And with Jalen Moore's at $15 million on the open market, which is what happened this past season when he left the Kansas City Chiefs, I think Colton McKivitz, who's got 1 year left under contract, would be worth at least that much, probably something like $20 million next year. So this all has to be contextualized by the fact that the 49ers have paid Trent Williams record money. But they didn't draft Trent Williams, and you could argue that Trent Williams is a unicorn and that he's probably the most physically gifted offensive lineman to ever play the sport of football. So they paid Trent Williams. That's the extent to which they've poured big money into the tackle position. They have paid centers over the years. They paid Weston Richburg and they paid Alex Mack, but the rest of it has been a Moneyball-like approach. And, Mike is reading Moneyball right now. We've been texting about it, and he said, it's crazy. I'm learning from Moneyball that Billy Beane and the A's, they didn't pay closers back in the day. They would obviously draft closers and develop closers, and they would see some success from closers. But when it came time to pay closers, they didn't do it. They didn't think that the cost benefit was where they needed it to be. They didn't see that efficiency in terms of Moneyball. That's why I say that outside of Trent Williams, the 49ers have definitely showed a Moneyball type of approach along the offensive line. You have guys on this list who have signed for really big money elsewhere. So it's not like these guys are all completely worthless in the eyes of the NFL. Mike McGlinchey signed for really big money with the Denver Broncos. Jalen Moore signed for big money, $15 million a year, from the Kansas City Chiefs. Aaron Banks just signed for really big money with the Green Bay Packers. So obviously there is enough talent here, enough on tape here for at least other teams to deem some of these players worth it from a pay perspective, but not enough for the 49ers to deem them worth it from a pay perspective. Are the 49ers correct? Are they incorrect? I mean, we'll let the results speak for that. I think that they've replaced Mike McGlinchey, who's making way more than Colton McKivitz with the same level of production from Colton McKivitz. And now they're going to try to replace Aaron Banks, who I don't think was all that good last season, maybe with Connor Colby, maybe with Ben Barch, but they're definitely going to play it on a more Moneyball-like level. They're not willing to pay big money to really anybody right now outside of Trent Williams along that offensive line. Again, the overarching performance has to be presented. This is what so many people get wrong. So many people act like this sunk down to number 30 or number 31 or number 32 last season, when in fact it didn't. The 49ers, in terms of cumulative pass blocking efficiency, were number 13. In terms of pass block win rate from ESPN, were number 14. It wasn't catastrophically bad. Where it was bad was when you looked at individual positions at specific areas of performance. So above this horizontal line, you see the 49ers starting offensive line from 2024. And red is bad and blue is good. As you can see, the 49ers were very good at run blocking across the board, except for Colton McKivitz, who's a little bit below average. Now, I think people need to be reminded, some people need to be reminded what percentile scores mean. Doesn't mean that they scored 43 on the test. This means that they're better than 42, like Colton McKivitz at a 42nd percentile run blocking score is better than 42% of other tackles. So he's almost average. 50% would be exactly average. You're trying to shoot to in the NFL where, obviously everybody's a good football player, but you're trying to shoot to be above 50%, even at the positions where you're not paying a whole heck of a lot of money. So the fact that Colton McKivitz improved from, I think, what was the 4th percentile in pass blocking to 56th percentile, that was big in 2024. The run blocking improved also. He was the only 49er under the 50th percentile. But these other guys, Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel, Dominic Puni, were all good run blockers for the 49ers in 2024. Where the issues came for San Francisco were along the interior line in pass protection. McKivitz was an above-average pass protector at right tackle. Huge for San Francisco. Trent Williams, even though he played last season hurt for most of it and wasn't available for a lot of it, was, again, a well above average pass protector at left tackle. So 2 thumbs up for the 49ers at both of those spots. It is the interior offensive line where San Francisco really can get better in terms of pass protection in front of Brock Purdy. Between Banks, who left in free agency, to the Packers, I think you could see why they decided not to extend Aaron Banks, not to vie for his services at the crazy high rate. What was it, like $18 million a year that the Green Bay Packers played him? Jake Brendel, who's regressed in pass protection down to the 39th percentile, or Dominic Puni, who did hit a rookie wall. I think the 49ers can get better at all 3 of those positions. And I think that Puni's naturally going to get better in his second year. He was a great run blocker throughout. I think some of the pass protection struggles came late for Dominic Puni, and I think that rock solid guy, great personality, a lot of talent. I think that Dominic Puni is going to be an above average guard for the 49ers for years to come. The big questions for me are left guard and center. Now, these are the big short-term questions for me, left guard and center. Now, I put stay on schedule at the bottom of the screen because I cannot emphasize enough how important it will be for the 49ers to be a firmly above average first down run offense. That's not only how the 49ers are set up. This is how the entire league, I think, is set up at this point, with the athleticism on the defensive line so firmly outpacing what offensive lines are doing. If you cannot run efficiently on first down to put opposing defenses on their heels, to take the steam out of some of these pass rushers who are just pinning their ears back at all times, if you can't do that, your offensive line is going to look overwhelmed no matter what. No matter who you have out there, even if you have 5 guys, like if you had 5 60 to 70th percentile offensive linemen across the board, right? Not superstars, but just 5 solid guys. If you didn't establish a good run game, if you didn't establish good action to force a defense to think about other things and not just pin its ears back on every down, you're going to look like you're overwhelmed in pass protection. Offensive linemen just cannot compete with defensive linemen unless they've got a little bit of an advantage in this game, and you build that advantage through play calling and through rushing success. So the biggest key for the 49ers in the short run especially is to stay on schedule. And I'll keep on coming back to the fact they finished number 20 in first down run efficiency last year. That's what made everything look as bad as it did when they're trying to play from behind, when they can't run the football. I mean, the defense ties into that as well. If you play better defense than the 49ers did last year, then you're going to be in a spot where you're not having to throw as much, where you're not going to be as predictable as an offense, where you can establish a run game with a little bit more consistency. And then when all those things fall into place, your offensive line is going to be playing downhill instead of uphill, and things are going to look a whole lot better. So in that way, 2024 offensive line eval is absolutely oversimplified. And I think it's really, really important to look at the nitty-gritty at this breakdown to see exactly where the weaknesses were, because you can oversimplify this in the positive direction or in the negative direction. I mean, a graph like this that I put up there to start this show, somebody could, somebody's a homer about the 49ers and they just want to say they're great at everything. Well, they'd be like, hey, look, they're in the upper half of the league in pass blocking. Everything's okay. It's like, well, they're better than the naysayers insist they are, but they're not as, this is not the whole story. Number 13 and number 14 may be okay, but the interior right here, and I think the biggest problems were at left guard and center last year, because you can count on Dominic Purdy to continue improving. It was left guard and center that are the bigger questions for the 49ers moving forward. Those spots aren't where the 49ers need them to be. So where do the 49ers go from here? I think interior offensive line is where we have to start, because that was the biggest weakness. And then we're going to move to the tackle position, because that's more of a long-term concern for the 49ers. Interior offensive line is about the Connor Colby contingency. This is why I've predicted that Connor Colby is at some point this season going to start at left guard. This is the 7th round draft pick out of Iowa. He's got a tremendous relative athletic score. I talked about it in the offensive line piece up on the San Francisco Standard. We could even scroll down to Connor Colby's relative athletic score. Here it is. For a guy picked in the 7th round, the fact that the 49ers were able to get a 9.50 relative athletic score, somebody who's tall, somebody who's got a broad jump of over 9 feet, the 40-yard dash right around 5 seconds for an interior lineman is stellar. I mean, he can move, he can run block. I just had LeVar Woods, who's been on Iowa's staff for a long time, who worked with both George Kittle and Connor Colby, had him on the show a little bit earlier this week. And I think both LeVar and I think that Connor Colby has the polish as a run blocker to immediately absorb a lot of what the 49ers are doing. I mean, schematically, there's a lot of crossover between Iowa and San Francisco. And you saw George Kittle, who also had a great relative athletic score, come out of Iowa and immediately be able to block in the 49ers system back in 2017. I think if Colby works on his craft as a pass protector to get it to a certain level this offseason and this training camp, a certain level of polish, he can plug in for San Francisco, at least in terms of the battle for that left guard spot. And Ben Barch is going to be part of it. Nick Zakelj is going to be part of it. And I firmly think, and I don't think this is that bold of a prediction, I think that they can be better at left guard even after losing Aaron Banks to the Green Bay Packers for big money in free agency. I'm going to keep on going back to the individual metric breakdown for the 49ers last year. You see it right here. That left guard spot did not perform well in pass protection, and Aaron Banks was able to earn $18 million annually from the Green Bay Packers. It might have even been $19 million. I mean, it was a huge, huge contract for somebody who consistently delivered below average pass protection scores for the 49ers. So I really, really do believe that there is a clear path to improvement at a cost-efficient price for the 49ers at left guard. I think that the one area where I thought the 49ers might make a bigger splash in free agency, but maybe it proved completely untenable because of the prices that we were seeing, was center. Because in the past, Kyle Shanahan had invested big time in the center position. It was Weston Richburg in 2018. Alex Mack, that was a big investment for the 49ers in 2021, but he only played 1 year before he retired. To me, when I had looked at trends of how the 49ers had built their offensive line, I saw big money, big investment in at least one tackle position. So obviously Joe Staley is a player that this regime had inherited. After he retired, they traded for Trent Williams. Trent Williams took over at huge money in 2021. He played 1 year on his old deal in Washington, and then the 49ers paid him record money in 21. They extended him last offseason. He wants to play until he's 40. He's going to be 37 years old this season. Obviously, health has been an issue for Trent Williams coming off of what was an ankle issue in 2024, but that has been where money has been allocated, and center has also been where money has been allocated. But after Alex Mack left, the 49ers have moved to what appears to be a little bit more of a money ball approach at center, and Jake Brendel's been the man there. If there was one spot where I thought the 49ers might pour some more money this offseason, I thought it would be center. I looked at somebody like Drew Dahlman, and I said, well, in the past, they've thought that this is a rising tide that could lift all boats because center is so important in the communication aspect of things for the 49ers. Maybe this is where they do pour some resources. It turns out that they're very salary cap limited this offseason, and that, Dahlman went for, it might have been $20 million this offseason. So they obviously weren't serious contenders in any Drew Dahlman sweepstakes, and they're going to have to deal with Jake Brendel at that center position. They're trying to develop guys behind him. We could even take a look at the depth chart here to see what else the 49ers might be able to do at center. Zoom in on it. They've been developing Zakel, who is really strong with his mind. Really, he's an athletic player, very cerebral player, came out of Fordham. I don't think he's a serious contender to usurp Jake Brendel, but he's probably the top backup option now for the 49ers. Between Zakel and Matt Hennessy. We'll see if Drake Nugent, who remains on the roster, is somebody who's taken another step for the 49ers. He was a really good center in college, but might be slightly undersized for the NFL level. So, I mean, they've got guys on this team who I think will theoretically compete for the backup position, but based on everything I'm gathering, this is Brendel or bust for the 49ers on the inside. And if that's the case, then you've got to strengthen the guard positions around him as much as possible. I mean, it has to work the other way around. We talk about center being the rising tide that lifts all boats. Well, the interior line, when it struggled as badly as it did last year in pass protection, you have to tighten it up from the outside moving in, and that's left guard and right guard. And you expect Purdy to continue his ascent. I've got Barch and Connor Colby at that left guard position battling for that spot. Zakel's going to be in on that as well. And, one thing that tells me that center is Jake Brendel's job, even though fans might not like to hear it, is that Kyle Shanahan was even talking about Matt Hennessy competing for the guard spot. Hennessy's somebody they got off the Atlanta practice squad last year, who was actually Drew Dahlman's predecessor in Atlanta, Alex Mack's successor in Atlanta at center. Hennessy, people were saying, well, this is going to be a center, right? This is somebody who's going to compete with Jake Brendel. If Kyle Shanahan's talking about Hennessy competing for left guard, I think that they're locked in on Brendel, and they've got to make those guard positions better around him. And Purdy is a godsend for the 49ers as a third-round pick from Kansas last year because of how he performed as a rookie. He might have hit a bit of that wall in pass protection, but I do think that the year two outlook for him is very bright. Then it's a left guard question for the 49ers. And then, it's also a question about Jake Brendel's knee tendonitis. That's something that really slowed him down, I think, through the offseason program last year. What was not a good bellwether for what was to come in 2024. The 49ers were dealing with a lot of guys who weren't available to participate in the offseason program. Seemed that the team was worn down after the big runs in 2022 and 2023. Brendel obviously was ready for training camp, but he was on a little bit of a pitch count. Maybe the longer offseason is going to help him out this year, and obviously the return of Christian McCaffrey to help put Brendel, who's a really athletic offensive lineman, put him into more of a position to play downhill as a run blocker to showcase some of that movement ability. I think that could make the 49ers look a whole lot better. Mike says that the chat is asking about Drake Nugent. Dahlman signed a 3-year, $42 million deal. How much guaranteed in that, Mike? Can you take a look at the full guarantees for Drew Dahlman? It's a lot of money. I mean, centers, when they got Alex Mack, it wasn't a small investment. They got Mack for $6 million a year. Richburg was a little bit more expensive. The reason they got Mack for the amount that they got Mack was because he was at the tail end of his career. He obviously only had 1 year left in retrospect. He retired after that 2021 season, but $6 million a year. It's not a tiny investment in a center. That had traditionally been a position that made less than the rest of the offensive line. So Dahlman, and at a price of $42 million total, center prices have jacked up here over the course of the past several seasons with the salary cap rising. And it was obviously something that the 49ers considered to be out of their price range. The questions persist right now about Drake Nugent. I'm going back to the depth chart for you guys. I have him at the bottom of the depth chart until I see some firm movement up. He was on the practice squad for the 49ers last season. Now, maybe he'll be ahead of somebody like Matt Hennessy, but Hennessy's a veteran, and they've talked about him competing at multiple positions, which I think is significant. Nick Zakelj, I think, made a lot of progress toward the end of last season. He only gave up one pressure over his time playing for the 49ers down the stretch run of 2024. I don't think the run blocking was great for Nick Zakelj, but the pass protection was actually really good. And this is a guy that we talked about taking people over mentally when they drafted him in 2022. He's very, very smart. They looked at him as a potential center of the future. So between his play at guard already, the technical opening at left guard, and the need for a backup center, I think that Nick Zakelj is higher up on that 49ers pecking order than somebody like Drake Nugent. And I think even higher up on the pecking order than somebody like Matt Hennessy. If you look at what I project for the offensive line right now, and now we could start shifting the discussion to the offensive tackle position and the future there. I have 9 players making the 53 at the moment. Obviously, you've got your starters. I think the likeliest day one starting combination for the 49ers is Williams, Ben Barch, who, by the way, was really good in limited action last year, Jake Brendel, Dominic Puni, and Colton McKivitz, left to right. They had agreed to terms with DJ Humphries, but for whatever reason, that fell apart. So they went and signed Andre Dillard, a former first-round draft pick. I think that he is most likely to be the 49ers swing tackle. So I think Andre Dillard makes the team. I obviously think that Connor Colby makes the team and at some point makes a move on the starting job at that left guard position. Or, you never know when injuries are going to strike. So somebody like Connor Colby, who's obviously a guard for the 49ers, he did play some tackle at Iowa, but he's a guard at the NFL level. He might be needed at right guard. He might be needed at left guard sooner rather than later. And I think that his coaching at Iowa and the fact that they produce such ready-made run blockers is going to really help the 49ers. So you've got Colby, you got Zakelj, who has developed as a backup center and as a backup guard. I think he's going to be a valuable piece. And as of right now, you have Spencer Burford entering the final year of his contract. I know that he disappointed as a backup or as a starting guard for the 49ers, but as a backup guard and tackle, a versatile lineman, there's real value in Spencer Burford. And he played decently well as a left tackle last year when the 49ers were decimated by injuries to close the season. So they've taken 8 offensive linemen on the 53 before. They've taken 9 on the 53 before. 8 might be the more usual, typical number that the 49ers take on the 53, but I think that 9 makes a lot of sense this year. Now, guys can still get hurt. Obviously, they have the practice squad to resort to. People are going to be asking a lot about somebody like Drew Moss out of Colorado State, who I think shares a lot in common with Connor Colby, is a really good run blocker, probably still has to work on some of the pass protection. Moss was an undrafted free agent, and I think that that's a player who probably will be targeted for the practice squad. But stuff can happen over the course of training camp, over the course of the preseason, and the 49ers will have to make contingencies for this offensive line. So we talk about the interior. And this is probably the best bunch that the 49ers will be able to deliver at the start of the year, but they've got a little bit more depth now with Colby, with Barch back from the injury, with somebody like Nick Zakelj entering the final year of his rookie deal. They've got a little bit more depth, so I think truly expect better results on the interior, especially with Dominic Purdy maturing from rookie into year 2. But what about that exterior line? The one spot where the 49ers have consistently spent big money under John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. That's where the big Trent Williams question comes in. Trent, I said it earlier, is the most gifted offensive lineman to ever play in the history of the NFL. I mean, you can't find anybody with better physical measurements. He's a future Hall of Famer. He's extremely important to this football team. I mean, one of the reasons the 49ers are so confident entering this 2025 season that they think that things are going to be getting better is that Trent Williams is going to be back. And he missed so much of last year with a really, really problematic ankle issue. You talk about rising tides who lift all boats. Trent Williams definitely falls into that category. When he's out there, you worry about so much less as a play caller, as an offensive lineman, as a quarterback, as a center. Big Trent's out there on the left side. Great. He makes the left guard position look a lot better too. And I think that Aaron Banks, some of the struggles that we saw from him last year happened because Trent Williams was next to him at that left tackle position. So obviously Williams is worth his weight in gold to the 49ers. That's why they've paid him top-level money twice already after they traded for him in that 2020 offseason. He got the big contract in 21, and he got the big contract in 2024. But this is where I start pivoting this to more of a long-term discussion. How long will Trent Williams be a top-shelf viable option for the 49ers? This is an honest question that anybody who follows the 49ers has to ask themselves. The retirement rumors are garbage, okay? They're not based in any substance, but there is a clear track record of injuries here. And Trent is 37 years old. Again, one of the greatest to ever do it. He's 37. Just last offseason, he was talking about wanting to play till 40. That might happen. But what might also happen, what probably also will happen based on the track record that we've seen over the course of his time ever since he joined the 49ers, there will be missed time at that left tackle position. So even in a best case scenario, based on what we've seen here in the past few years, the 49ers will need at least short-term answers at left tackle because Trent Williams might miss 2 or 3 games a year. Worst case scenario, he misses a lot more like last season. And then all of a sudden you're really facing the future now. So at what point will the 49ers just be forced to add a tackle to add a tackle? And I put draft a tackle to draft a tackle, but obviously they found Trent Williams through the trade market, not necessarily through the draft market. I know that they're clearly fixated on offensive tackle draft value, which is why we haven't seen the 49ers draft one high since Mike McGlinchey in 2018. But at some point, they're going to have to add just to add. They're going to have to go strictly not best player available. They're going to have to go strictly, okay, it's time to get a tackle. They might have been interested in doing so in the first round this year. But all 3 of the main names, Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks, and Armand Membu were off the board before they picked number 11. So they went to Mykel Williams. I think they were interested in a 3rd-round tackle this year. I mean, there's so many different things the 49ers had to do this offseason. It's been really busy. And, I mean, we've gone through the checklist, and they've checked most of the things off. But I think the one thing they wanted to do but weren't able to do was add an offensive tackle through the draft. And I think they're really interested in adding a developmental guy in the 3rd round. This is my theory. I could be wrong, but usually I'm pretty good at putting tea leaves together. I think the 3rd round with pick number 100 going to Upton Stout, who looks like a really good player, by the way. I know the 49ers really love him, but at 98 and 99, the Raiders had back-to-back picks. And I think the 49ers were surprised by the fact that the Raiders used both of those picks on offensive tackles. Caleb Rogers out of Texas Tech and Charles Grant out of William & Mary. 49ers were interested in both of those players at 98 and 99. They wanted Rogers to come in on a 30 visit. He did, and we know the 49ers take those 30 visits really seriously. They even went through a private workout with Charles Grant. We know that they're ultra picky on traits at offensive tackle, which is why they typically don't draft those guys very high. They either want some kind of lower round, massive value where they could see, okay, this athleticism can be developed, or they want one of those guys really high up in the first round, because that's where offensive tackles go if they have the traits that the 49ers are looking for. So when we looked at Charles Grant, we said, oh my goodness, this guy's got all the traits the 49ers want to be able to play that exterior line position, to be able to develop into somebody who can block these ultra athletic edge rushers. But he just comes from a smaller school. That's going to, give teams a relative discount. He's not going to go in the first round. He's probably not going to go in the second round because he played at William & Mary. And the 49ers, they've worked him out privately. It looks like everything's lining up for the 49ers to either be able to grab Charles Grant or grab somebody like Caleb Rogers as pick number 100 approaches, because the Raiders are picking twice, and number 98 and number 99. What the Raiders did is they just went ahead and picked both of those guys. They picked Rogers, they picked Grant, 98, 99, right in front of the 49ers. All of a sudden, your plan to draft a developmental offensive tackle goes out the window, which is why and this is just my theory, I think this is why the 49ers went into overdrive when it came to signing these veteran swing tackles with injury histories. I mean, Andre Dillard was in line to be a starting tackle for the Philadelphia Eagles, and he tore his biceps muscle. And he did start some time for Philadelphia, but I think his career after that was derailed into the journeyman track. Somebody like DJ Humphries, even though he agreed to terms with the 49ers, but obviously hasn't finalized his contract. DJ Humphries, a former Pro Bowler, but torn ACL and didn't play nearly as well last year for the Kansas City Chiefs, coming off that torn ACL. So the 49ers probably wanted a developmental guy to be able to work into that tackle spot over the course of this offseason. Instead, they're going to have to go with a veteran, and they're going to have to hope that they can scrounge some value from that veteran, even though there is injury history, because it's just not possible to find a tackle with a clean sheet in free agency. Like, these positions are way too they're way too valuable and way too rare. Like a player like DJ Humphries in his prime was not going to be let go by the Arizona Cardinals, right? You're only going to get DJ Humphries coming off an ACL tear when he's on the wrong side of 30, and he's clearly not the same player that he was when he was in his Pro Bowl prime. So you're going to have to you either have to use that premium draft capital, or you're going to back into luck like the 49ers did with Trent Williams in 2020. And even then, there was an asterisk. He was coming off of cancer at the time, and Washington, he was also coming off of holdout drama with Washington. It was a poorly run franchise. I think Ron Rivera probably did Trent Williams and the 49ers a solid, sending him over for a 5th-round pick. I mean, lightning probably is not going to strike twice in that case. But at some point, you're going to have to add a tackle just to add a tackle, and you're probably going to have to overextend yourself, because Trent Williams is not going to last forever, and Colton McKivitz is on the final year of his contract, and you've been able to scrounge very passable play from him, but it's not going to be coming at this kind of discount for all too long. McKivitz is making $5.8 million per year right now, and that number might go up over 15, maybe 20 million next year. And I'm not sure, based on the 49ers track record of not wanting to pay offensive linemen big money, I'm not sure if he's going to fit in the 49ers budget. Again, this circles back to our original part of this discussion. Only one of the 49ers' 10 drafted offensive linemen has been extended by the team. They've drafted 10 guys for the O-line since Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch took over, and only one of them has been paid by the team, and not a lot. I mean, Colton McKivitz, he's playing at a very, very undervalued price right now. And it's not going to be the same next year. I can guarantee you that. Once he hits the open market next year, Colton McKivitz is, I think, in line for at least a 2.5x, probably a 3x pay raise. $5.8 million. So the 49ers were able to extend McKivitz at a bargain, which is why they were happy to do it. But the rest of these guys, well, no one has been extended. Now, I know some of them not eligible yet, like Dominic Pooney, Connor Colby. Nick Zakel's technically eligible. He was the same draft class as Brock Purdy, but not somebody who's turned into a starter for the 49ers yet at this point. So he's playing out his rookie deal, and the 49ers are playing money ball with these offensive linemen outside of Trent Williams. Let's talk about some of the commonalities between these guys. McGlinchey, really good run blocker, right? And somebody who Sean Payton in Denver and that system said, okay, he's valuable to us for a deal that's very lucrative. The 49ers said we can replace him with Colton McKivitz. You go through the 49ers performance last season, Banks, an above average run blocker. Dominic Purdy, look at him, 89 in that run blocking score. Anyway, you go through that performance and you could see that in general, the 49ers are better run blockers than they are pass blockers. And I think that that's rung true of most guys on this list. Ultimately, the 49ers, though, have not deemed anybody to be the A-list type of talent they've been willing to pay massive money into. I'm ready for questions. We've gone deep into this Brock Purdy offensive line. Mike, you have any questions? Let's see. I don't think Mike does, but I'm ready for your questions. Gilbert asks, why no Humphreys? Because he didn't actually sign a contract. He agreed to terms. His agency put the tweet out there, but it turns out he never signed the contract. Now, I don't know if it was a physical issue. I think that we would have found out if this was a physical issue. Maybe he wanted more money and he decided he got cold feet before he actually signed the contract. The thing about DJ Humphreys is that he wasn't very good for Kansas City last year, but he's a year further removed from the ACL tear. So at least on the surface, it seemed like an ideal situation for him to be able to reestablish himself now that he's getting healthier as a swing tackle for the 49ers. But obviously they could not consummate the agreement. So now it's Andre Dillard, another former first-round pick, instead of DJ Humphreys on the 49ers roster. Is Jesse Sapolo or Harris Barton available? I see Jesse at almost every single 49ers game. Still looks like he's in great shape. So maybe you can bring in Jesse Sapolo to play on that interior line for San Francisco. Guys, I think the starting five is set. I don't think that, a lot of people are fantasizing about some sort of mix-up of the starting five, but I think it became clear over the course of this offseason that when Aaron Banks left, obviously left guard has opened up. I think Ben Barch is the front runner. I think that it's much more likely that a veteran starts there week one. Now, Connor Colby can play his way into it over the course of training camp, but I think that's not going to be something that changes until the season progresses. In all likelihood, it's Trent Williams at left tackle, Ben Barch at left guard, Jake Brendel at center, Dominic Purdy at right guard, and Colton McKivitz at right tackle. The swing man, I would think that Andre Dillard is the leader in the clubhouse there, but they like the versatility that Burford brings to the table as a backup. And, Colby probably makes this team if he delivers anywhere sort of the run blocking that he did at Iowa. And I think that he's got a lot of developmental upside as a seventh round pick, as a rookie, and Nick Zakel. I think they take 9 offensive linemen on the 53. That's obviously barring injuries, which can change a lot of things. Greg asks, any update with Brandon Ayuk? I don't know what the update would be. He's rehabbing, and we'll check in at the start of training camp to see where that rehab is. It's one of those things where you just have to do math. He got hurt, last October. He underwent surgery in November. You add 9 to 12 months from last October, and then 9 months would be the low end for things. 9 months from October is what? July? So, yeah, on the low end of the fast end of the recovery spectrum, he'd be ready for training camp, but I don't think that that's all too likely. I mean, it would be amazing for the 49ers if he'd be 100% ready for training camp. It's probably more likely to expect him to miss the start of the season in 2025. But that's all speculation on my part. We're going to have more firm information once training camp comes around. Just have to be patient in that regard. Nothing happened to Hennessy. Hennessy's on the team. Hennessy's going to compete for center, and Kyle Shanahan noted left guard, which makes me think that Jake Brendel has a stranglehold on that center position. You want to see Drew Moss make the 53-man roster? He's going to have a shot. I think there's a lot in common between Drew Moss and Connor Colby. They got a couple of good-looking guards in the run game who are going to have to polish up their pass protection. No, I don't think there's many interesting centers in free agency. The most interesting one was Drew Dahlman, and he signed for $42 million. So, this goes back to my main point that league-wide, D-line's outpacing O-line. So offensive linemen cost a lot. And the 49ers have tried to moneyball this. That's why they've only re-signed one of the 10 offensive linemen they've drafted. I get it. They want to save the money for the real premier players like Trent Williams. And in a hard-capped league, you have to make tough decisions. But I think it helps conceptualize how the 49ers are operating here, and they're trying to scrounge for value. My main thing, though, is that they've got to be better blocking for Brock Purdy on the interior. And I think that's why they let Aaron Banks go. They weren't about to pay him all the money the Green Bay Packers did for below-average pass protection. And then we wonder if the interior O-line, if Ben Bartch was an above-average pass protector over his very short sample last year before he suffered the high ankle sprain. So can Ben Bartch bring that for the 49ers? Can Connor Colby raise the ceiling for the 49ers on the inside? And it's not just about the two starters. So say Bartch starts at left guard and Dominic Puni is your right guard. Not just about them. Guys get hurt. And this is where a lot of offensive lines run into trouble because there's such a shortage in the NFL. Sure, you might look good 1 through 5, but what happens when 2 of those guys are down? Is that going to derail your whole season? So, that's where Drew Moss also comes in. But we talk about the Colby contingency on the inside. We talk about Nick Zakelj. We talk about Moss. What happens if Ben Bartch or Dominic Puni is unavailable to go? I have a strong belief that it takes 8 quality offensive linemen on a roster. Some people will say 7. I think it will take 8 to win a Super Bowl. You're playing this many games, 17-game regular season. You're playing the playoffs. It's going to take 20 to win a Super Bowl at least, right? You're playing the 20-game season plus, whatever you're doing in preseason, and you have to withstand training camp because you got to put that work in. If you don't have a collection of offensive linemen that goes beyond 5 in depth, and I think it needs to be 8. Some people will say 7. You're not going to withstand the marathon. That's why we have to talk about everybody, including Connor Colby, including Drew Moss, Spencer Burford, Dillard. We're talking about swing tackle. It's about the depth of the unit. And, I could wrap this by emphasizing that the 49ers, again, were not as bad as a unit in pass protection as people made them out to be in 2024. This was an above average unit in terms of the cumulative pass protection scores. But when we look at the zoomed in, the more granular details, they were particularly weak on the interior and pass protection. And that's a big problem for any quarterback. That's what they have to focus to improve in the short run. And then they have to make sure that the tackle contingencies in the long run, with McKivitz entering his final year and with Trent Williams entering age 37, they got to make sure that long run is also buttoned down. And that's one area where I think they wanted to really invest this offseason, at least with a developmental prospect, but I think the Raiders might have undercut them. Last question, and this is a good one. Mike says, what do the 49ers see in Jake Brendel that the fan base does not? And, this is one where we go back to cerebrally, the center has to identify the safety rotations, has to set the protections for the offensive line. So much of what the center does is up here. And I think the fan base will see Jake Brendel. We saw some of the anchor struggles. He's a lighter offensive lineman. He moves really well, but with the knee tendonitis, I think that some of the strength issues have been a problem. That's what the fan base will see in terms of tape, especially some of the bad plays if people try to single those out online. What the outsiders probably aren't seeing is what Jake Brendel is delivering from that cerebral standpoint. And I think that Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers have been generally happy with that. I think that he has set what the offensive line is doing when the offensive line has that type of responsibility at a good level for the 49ers. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't physical limitations here. especially if he is dealing with the knee tendonitis. And I think that in an ideal world, you do try to upgrade the center position. It just is a hard-capped league, and it's tough to find a center who fits in Kyle Shanahan's scheme. So make those guard positions better. I think that's the key for Brock Purdy's offensive line.